Okay, this one's for Gabby.
I realized that being in the classroom and teaching isn't just a career, but it's a calling. It's an important and integral part of my life, and I would do anything and everything to always be back in the classroom.
This year, I learned that I can do hard things like make videos and be on camera a lot.
I'm Mrs. Lopez, and what I've learned over this past year during the pandemic is just how strong, resilient, and adaptable Ike students and teachers are.
This year I learned that partner dancing without a partner on the internet is really difficult.
This year I have relearned to not focus so much on what we don't have, but to be incredibly grateful for what we do have in our lives. And man, we miss the kids.
Hi, so what I learned this year are the ins and outs of Zoom, but also every detail of every Marvel movie, because that's what we did a lot of, watch movies.
This year I learned that our Ike School is so much more than a building full of classrooms, but a community of amazing learners, both our students and our staff who learned so many new ways to overcome so many challenges this year. I couldn't be prouder of everyone.
My kids learned how to be a lot more independent. Instead of going to organized sports all the time, they had to learn how to entertain themselves. They rode their bikes, they built their own bike trails, and they really gained a lot of independence. We also learned how to use technology in the classroom, a lot more efficiency, even when we're teaching in person, which I'm so grateful we do.
The other thing I've learned that I think is even more important is that when we work together as a world, as a community, as a school, as a family, we can overcome anything. And those two things, I think, are the most important things that I've learned during the pandemic. One other thing, I save a lot more money when I stay home. Silly, but true.
But one thing that I learned this year, it's more important about the people in your life than the things in your life. I hope we have a much better 2021.
Mr. Gregory's class, here we go.
I'd much rather be at school than distance learning so I can see people. I feel like it's easier to learn in person than being online.
Well, first of all, I learned how to Zoom because I didn't even know what that was before. And I learned that how resilient that we are as a group of humans working together, and how grateful I am for Roseville City that we are open again and back at school with my favorite people, which are my students and our coworkers.
This year I learned how to finally slow down and take time for myself and my dogs and my family, and it's something that I'm working on every single day.
Something that I realized I've really missed over the past year is my relationships and being around people. Whether it be my family, my friends, my students, I just miss interacting with people, and I'm really thankful to have that back.
You know what I realize is there's nothing can replace teaching kids live.
This year I realized the school is the root of our community, not only in terms of education, but also social and emotional. School is a grounding point for our kids.
This year I've learned that staff and students, we are amazingly resilient. We do better when we work together. And it's been amazing to be back in person. It's been a good year to be a Wildcat, and I'm so glad we're back together.
This year I learned that having friends make you happier.
I learned this year that no social interaction makes you go crazy. This year I learned how important it is not to take things for granted.
This year I learned about how important actual school is and how awesome being in school is.
This year I learned that nothing goes to plan.
This year I learned how important it is to be in actual school.
This year I learned how much more fun it is to be in real life person.
This year I learned that how annoying my brother is, and that things are gonna happen and you just don't really know how long they're gonna last, and you just have to kind of adjust.
This year I learned that even though masks are very tiny, they are very annoying.
This year I realized that you really need to savor the little things in life.
This year I learned how drastically things can change. This year I realized that nothing is more important than your friends and family. This year I learned that I can go along with the flow.
This year I realized how hard life can be.
This year I realized that family is important.
This year I learned how important alone time is.
This year I learned how to do everything on computers.
This year I learned that I should never take online schooling again.
This year I learned just how important my family is to me.
This year I realized how grateful I am to be able to go in person at school.
I learned this year that everybody's nice here. I learned that it's important to keep trying.
I learned this year that anything can happen. It's important to never give up.
Is it going? Okay. I learned that the world has a lot of changes.
I realized this year how fast things can change and how grateful I am for my family.
This year I realized how important friends are.
I learned this year that you have to spend as much time with your family as you can.
This year I learned how scary the world could be.
This year I learned that anything is possible with the help of others.
I've realized how much I actually miss actual going to school compared to online school.
I learned not to take things for granted. I learned to be grateful for what I have, and I learned more about myself and my family.
I learned how to go with the flow.
I've learned that online school is more miserable than actually going to school.
I learned that I actually like school and not staying home.
In school, I learned how to make new friends, and I learned how to do ballroom, and I learned more math.
I learned that things can change in an instant.
I learned that my computer is my best friend.
I learned that school is better in person than on Zoom.
This year I've learned to value the people around you.
This year I've learned that being with your family isn't bad after all.
This year I've learned that things don't always go our way. This year I've learned how much we need social interaction and to be close with friends.
This year I have learned how grateful I am of how much of a community we have become.
This year I've learned to stay positive.
This year I learned to not be shy around cameras.
This year I've learned how to use Zoom.
This year I have learned what quarantine means.
This year I have learned that life is a bumpy road, but also school is not really good on Zoom.
I learned that it's easier to stay on task in school instead of Zoom.
I learned I can't take things for granted.
But the one thing I really truly value now is connection. And that's connection with students, coworkers, family members, pets. It's that connection. It's thriving on those relationships, being able to support one another. And I have seen so much support this past year that I will never forget the value of connection.
Hi, I'm Mr. O, and over the course of this last year, I relearned how important quality time is, specifically with family members. Time flies. I have a 16-month-old now and a baby on the way, and he's learning things every day. And I've just learned to cherish the moment, cherish the season, and take advantage of that time at home.
Hi, Ike Wildcats. This year I learned to cherish time with friends and family.
So in thinking of this past year, the whole COVID year and anniversary, what I learned or realized is how important and how much I love seeing people's faces. Even in the classroom, when I see a classroom of half faces, half masks, and somebody takes a drink of water and I see the whole face, how much different it is, and how much I miss the emotions of people looking at their whole face. I'll be glad when they're all gone.
One thing I learned this year is how much we really, really need each other.
Okay, this one's for Gabby.
This year I've learned that life throws you curveballs and you struggle, but you'll get through it because it's life, and life won't give you things you can't handle.